back from the dead. Are you ready? Let's go.
Back from the dead.
We're back from the dead.
Hell yeah.
We're back from the dead. Back from the dead. Back from the dead. Back from the dead. Ladies and gentlemen, you're all invited to go fucking mental on this motherfucking drop. The countdown has just begun. Are you ready? Let's go. Now we're back from the dead. We're back from the dead.
Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to the channel. Today it is a paranormal podcast day and I will be joined with Eilfie very soon. Hopefully everybody's doing well. If you're new here, this is Ghost Girl Diaries. This is our podcast where we talk about everything haunted, paranormal, and occult. And I hope that you are brave enough to join the circle. What is going on? I'm going to bring in my sidekick this week is Eilfie. Music is in the house. What are you doing, Eilfie? How have you been?
Good. Been a long time, hasn't it?
I know. Like, where how have you been? Haven't seen you in like 40 years. Like,
No, it's been good and everything. Spring is finally coming, so the weather's warming up and everything. So, yay!
Yeah.
I'm over with winter.
yeah. How's Pennsylvania been? You said it was a little chilly this week, this past winter. It was all kinds of weird stuff going on.
Well, it was just honestly miserable, but it's gotten warm. It's gotten nice now. Everything's popping up, and it's like, I swear I've been most looking forward to this spring in a very long time.
Right. You're like, yay! I like the spring, and you're Miss Little Kitchen Witch. You like to get your dandelions and make jellies, and you do all kinds of fun stuff. What's your like most favorite vegan witchy thing to make?
Let's see here. I love working with textured vegetable protein, which is like these little granule stuff, and it makes an awesome like basically kind of a sloppy Joe or something like that.
Oh, really?
Also, tofu is awesome. Is great to work with. I mean, it's so versatile. You can do almost anything with tofu.
And on the jams and jellies, are they hard to like make?
What was that?
On the jams and jellies, are they hard to make?
They're not too difficult. This year I'm going to try again with the dandelion jelly, see how it goes. I was actually quite surprised how it tasted. It's like it has a nice citrusy taste to it, so I'm looking forward to making our batch of that and everything.
Yeah, once we're traveling with Eilfie, she's going to be our, like, vegan chefetta. She's going to be making all of us fun stuff. We never know what she's cooking. She's always making all kinds of conjuring good stuff in the kitchen. That's her thing.
I'm going to have to do a lot of cooking because trying to look for places.
Yeah, really, right? Especially on the road, we're doing crazy stuff.
Oh.
So, how have you been? You definitely don't have anything fun to catch up on. You are the normal one of the three. You have very calm life over there. But thank you. You were also so supportive with, both of us. Kat went through it too with losing Lily. And just thank you for... Eilfie was like our glue through that whole thing. She's like, are you guys okay? Just checking in. What's going on?
Send text like, are you guys all right? Everything cool? Need a chat? Need a vent? Whatever.
Are you alive? No. What's going on?
Yeah.
So, okay, we have a couple things to chat about because I'm kind of excited to bring Eilfie in on this. This is Eilfie's version of a catch-up, but it's definitely not going to be as big as Kat and I. One, TikTok is blowing up for Ghost Girl Diaries. So I've been pushing content, and Eilfie was making fun of me earlier today. She's like, you're pushing out so much content. Like, are you okay? Like, are you alive? Like, what's going on? Yeah.
Sleep. Do you at least get some caffeine in you?
I stopped drinking coffee about a week ago. I wanted to see how I would react, like, with my body. I was just going through it still, the emotions of, like, losing my mom, and I was worried it was causing me anxiety. So I finally had my first iced coffee back today. And I think that the problem was I was consuming way too much caffeine. So I just need to calm it down a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Just maybe too much coffee is, like, not good for me, Yeah,
when you start vibrating, it's like maybe you need to cut back.
Yeah, I think that there's a problem when it's like, maybe it's the coffee that's causing the anxiety, you know what I mean? But yeah, TikTok, we're at, I pushed it so hard this week, we ended up we're at 11.4K followers in 1 week.
Wow, I saw when you posted the 10K and it's like, it's jumping up really fast. It's like, okay, wow.
I know, I had this conversation with Eilfie and Kat when I was, coming back to planet Earth after all the trauma that I had been through, and I texted group chat and I was like, okay, Krystal's back, she's here, she's ready to dive in. And I remember telling you guys in group chat, I was like, I'm going to thrust myself back into Ghost Girl Diaries, and you both were like, Are you sure you're ready? Can you handle it?
I figured you could kind of, I was one that was like, oh, okay, Krystal's returned to her body.
She is.
She's come back, and then you decide to literally hit the ground running.
I did, and that
after at least being in your body.
Yeah, I have a stellium in Aries, and man, when I am serious about something, my stellium's in my 10th house of, like, career and public image. And I am hardcore when it comes to my work ethic. And when I'm serious about setting a goal, I make that goal happen. And so our first goal was obviously to hit 10K on TikTok. I had no idea that it was going to happen in the matter of a week, but it did. And so I'm just going to keep killing it. Next goal is 10K. Next goal is 100K.
Yeah, you got it.
Next goal is 500K. Next goal is 1 million. So that's, I mean, I'd honestly like to get past 1 million, but we're going to slowly, I'm going to start incorporating miniature, like 1-minute paranormal investigations. I did order a Huff box, so I'm going to start incorporating some more content, but I wanted to see, we've had a couple viral videos. Have you seen that on TikTok? Like, we had one hit 37K. We've had a couple of decently hit videos.
Well, I like your little mini, like, talks, especially when you talk about the cults and such, and just little splices of information, because it's like, TikTok it's not like you get full documentary, but I like that you give little bite-sized information, and I think that's what's probably really hit home for people, what really engaged them and everything. Especially since I think you divide them in like 3 to 4 parts and everything. I do. Yeah,
I did an Aleister Crowley one today on 3 parts. And I did one like sex magic, one on like, I think in that one I incorporated, did you know that his parents were Christian? This is probably what made him get into sex magic, you know?
He's going from one extreme to the other, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's literally like, don't ask why Aleister Crowley is who he is. Like, he clearly was, Cat in her soapbox when she gets involved with, oh, P.S. Today's Cat's birthday. Happy birthday, Cat. Huge happy birthday. She's the big 3-0. I was on the phone with her last night. I don't know if I should share this, but I'm going to anyway. She called me at like 11 o'clock her time, so 3-hour difference from Vegas to East Coast, and she was like, will you just stay on the phone with me until midnight, until my birthday? And I was like, okay, are you okay? She's like, I don't know yet. She's like, I might have a breakdown leaving my 20s, I might not. And I did. When I hit 30, I cried for like a 24-hour period. I don't know why. It was like letting go of those like you know what I mean? Like letting go of the 20s. And then the next day I was like, I don't feel any different than I did in my 20s, so I just don't really care about it. You know what I mean?
It doesn't feel any different, honestly. It's like, I don't know, it feels like when you hit 30, it's this idea, it's like, what, you're going to spontaneously combust or something?
Well, you do. And I think when you're younger, people make you feel like, quote, old if you're 30 or like in your 30s. And honestly, I would not trade my 30s for my 20s any day. I just wouldn't. Like, I was, like, well, yeah, we were all really dumb in our 20s, and, like, that's, like, for learning and growing and doing stupid things, and, like, So, anyway, she's out celebrating tonight, so good for you, Kat. You get it. Yeah, I know. So, anyway, TikTok's going well, so our next big goal is 100K. I love TikTok. I love filming for TikTok. It's easy. It's fun. I mean, I love it. I'm actually going to start pre-recording for YouTube this upcoming week. I wanted to get TikTok established first and then move on to the next. And then the podcast was next, which is what we've now established. And then next is getting YouTube back on track. So I will be doing YouTube uploads. The YouTube uploads will be on the new Paranormal channel. Until we hit 1,000 subscribers, we will not have the podcast live on that channel. It will eventually be moved over, but for now it's not. The new channel, though, is going to have new content. It's not going to be like it used to be. I have some really good ideas of things I'm going to share. I'm also going to be doing longer mini investigations with the Huff box on there, like 5 to 10 minute investigations. I'm hoping as that goes, people will ask questions, like wanting to ask questions, and then I can incorporate those fan knowledge or questions into a new video. You know what I mean? So I have some really good ideas coming up. And if you're not a part of the Facebook fan, it's a private fan group. They're always in there coming up with new ideas. I have some really great mods in there, and so go to the Facebook fan group too, because they talk privately about and give me really good ideas on what they want to see. So next thing I want to talk about with you is we shot as a crew a feature film. A feature documentary film, Paranormal, in February. Mm-hmm. And you specifically were the one that was like, Krystal, your mom, like, just passed. Like, are you sure? Are you okay? Like, should you be doing this?
Because it's like, it's one of those, like, I know you know your shit, but also at the same time, it's one of those, like, it's quite an undertaking. But, okay. I mean, I trust you know you.
I know, I hit it really quick one night. I just texted group chat and I was like, we're going to do this. And you were like, okay, if you can handle it, okay. And I was like, are you sure? Like, you don't have to do the history. And you were like, done the next day. You're like, history, done. And so you did all the history. You also did the paranormal footage review for post-production, which is a really important job. Now, like, without giving too much away, do you want to share what it was like? What did we catch? Like, you said it was, some of that stuff was some scary shit, literally was quoted by Eilfie.
I mean, I will also admit, I was having a bit of flashbacks going like, oh yeah, I remember doing this now. How long it takes to do this.
You're like, oh, it took a year and a half to go through 4 hours of footage. Great. Now my brain's falling out,
Oh yeah, especially since you had this like watch, stop, rewind, rewatch, take note, rewatch again. But no, it was like not trying to give away anything. It was really interesting and really good stuff, and there were moments where like I was rewinding back. I think I even texted you a couple times going like, I heard this thing. Who all was in this room? I just want to get a head count here.
Right. You thought that security was with us, and it was not. It was just Kat and I, so there was definitely other movement in there. And
like, I'm hearing something. Who else was with you? And you're like, no one. Like, oh, okay. Okay.
And then there was one point I'm basically leaving this paranormal graveyard, haunted graveyard. And then there was some horrible noises going on in the background, some terrible stuff. And
it was just like, no, don't go back, please, don't go back.
And then I look at the camera and I go, okay, we're gonna go back in. And Eilfie was like, please just don't.
Please don't. Please don't. It's not. You're good. You got enough. It's good.
It's
Just
good.
call it night.
Yeah. So Eilfie got to do post-production, so she's going to be major creds. In the documentary, we're going to be, a lot of people on TikTok are asking when I'm releasing it on YouTube. It's going to be a while. It's going to first be released through film festival circuits. So it's going to be probably like a 55-minute documentary or longer. It can be up to, I think, like 87 minutes.
So much footage, you could easily make it.
I know. Yeah, there's several investigations through this, and I have not given away to anybody other than the crew what knows what it's about and what it's based on. But Eilfie, you've done a lot of investigations, and you've even said this is something that people have never seen before.
It was just one of those, like, because I mean, I've looked up, I've done investigation review, but like reviewing this, I'm like, okay, this is different. This is different, interesting. It just like, it kind of took me aback and like, I think there might be something here.
we may have just created a new paranormal genre, don't you think? I mean, a little spring off. I think we created something new, and we weren't. It was unexpected. I was not planning on this happening, you know?
Which is sometimes the best things.
It was.
It's a happy accident.
Yeah, it was a happy accident. It's going to be amazing. So if you want to see it, I will be releasing, once we release it to these film festivals, then you have to wait to find out if you were accepted into the film festivals. We're going to be releasing it to many film festivals, predominantly like paranormal horror film festivals. If you live by any of these places that it gets accepted by, of course I'll release that online, and you'll be able to attend the film festivals and see the film in person. But the fingers crossed hope is what happens after it's released to film festivals. If it wins awards, which I'm not to toot my own horn, but we've already won 5 film festivals. So I assume we will. I think this is better than the other, don't you think, Eilfie? I mean, this is some epic shit.
I think this has a very high possibility.
Yeah, this is kind of gonna blow things out of the water. This is nothing like you guys have even seen me shoot before, because I've also put other pilots online. This is not a pilot. This is a feature. And once it gets accepted to these festivals, there's a possibility that it will be accepted for distribution. So that could mean being sold to a cable network. That could mean being sold to a movie theater chain. Distribution is a very wide range word. It also means that it could be purchased and be made into a series. So you'll just have to sort of be patient. It's a process. But I know I've released a few clips here and there online, but I can't give too much away because it has to be saved for. It's going to be amazing. I'm in the process of editing. In fact, after the podcast, what am I doing on my Friday night? I will be editing the feature. Because Krystal doesn't sleep. She just works 24/7. She's obsessed with Ghost Girl Diaries. I believe in this. I think we all do. We're lucky. The 3 of us, Eilfie, Kat, and I found 2 people that believe in this as much as I do. There's such a strong message behind it, which is strong women in film and strong women in paranormal. And I think when you get the right people together, that's how lucky I got, Eilfie, with all of us. Is just, in the past when I've shot pilots, it was so complicated, and I had people that forgot to hit the freaking record button on set, and just the most simple of things. And it was so weird with this feature, although biting off a feature is like a major deal. it just came together. All of you guys were like, even security was like, yep, I'm there. Like, everybody's like, yep, let's do this. Like, it was so effortless. And I think that's what's going to make the outcome of it so beautiful. And I have to give a shout out to you because you did all the history and you did one of the hardest jobs in post-production, which is going over paranormal evidence. So shout out to Eilfie. She's a huge important part of this. So
with it, I wouldn't be surprised if you find more in your editing. So
Eilfie says there's so much evidence that she doesn't even think she marked it all. It was just constant voices, shadows. We do think we encountered a skinwalker in the grave. Even Eilfie was like, that was something not human, period.
Well, then there's a wonderful, like, oh, let's go towards it.
Well, at least you can tell people how I am as an investigator. I'm pretty fearless. And Eilfie said she's sitting there watching it. She's like, I'm sure it's inhuman. I'm sure it's a skinwalker. And what does Krystal do? All right, we're going to go back out there, guys. Are you ready? And Eilfie was like, I was sitting there watching the footage, like, I just can't watch this. She said she was on the edge of her seat, like, sick, because it was so scary. You know? Well,
be taking notes. I'm watching this.
Well, people get the wrong idea of females, that you're scared and you can't handle it, or especially me being like this, you know, the typical atypical dumb blonde, you know, that's like the stupid girl next door, and I'm like, oh nay, I have bigger balls than most men I know. You know what I'm saying? So speaking of that's a great segue for the next topic. Which is, did you see Zach's post on Instagram?
Ooh, that.
Yes. So yesterday, Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures posted on Instagram that he is now essentially an executive, not just with Travel Channel, but with Discovery Plus, and he has basically been contracted to sign a certain amount of new paranormal shows. So the way I interpreted it was, I know it's huge. I mean, that's like at this point, he can't get any bigger. You know, like if he has some fear, thank you for the bits, I think, or somebody subscribed, I'm not sure which one. At this point, he's at the top of the chain of the paranormal shark that like nobody can reach him. So he needs to not be inferior to anyone else, because no one's going to ever get to the top where he's at now, being an executive at not just a network, but an umbrella network, which is Discovery, which owns so many other networks. You know what I mean? You know, you've been in TV like I have for years.
Well, his only other next step is, which I don't know if you do this, but basically if he created his own channel.
Yes.
Like, it's separate own,
like Oprah Winfrey own win.
Yeah, like his own Oprah channel thing. Which, I mean, I would not put it past him. Like, I can see that happening, but I feel like I can see him first building on this before he decides if he wants to do that. But right now, yeah, he's like at the top.
He's at the top. Yep.
Titles.
And people can make fun of him and talk smack about his, you know, demonic evil portrayal of his shows. It doesn't matter. He has now crawled to the top, so, you know, at this point, if you're making and mocking fun of him, you're making fun of the top dog, and it's out of absolute jealousy, in my opinion, because you can't get any bigger than that. You just can't.
People still watch him, he still gets the views. It's still, I mean, even if it could be people just, like, rage watching or something, he still garners interest, and there's still people who talk about him.
Well, actually, that's the Kardashian theory, is you want people to talk smack. Like, I'll be scrolling through, you know, the Ghost Girl Diaries TikTok, you know, finding inspiration on what to post, or if there's, like, trending sounds, and people pop up constantly just talking smack about him. And it's like, first of all, I'm laughing, because you've just wasted an entire minute, an entire video of talking smack about the top dog. And I don't think people realize in paranormal, it's not even just paranormal, it's at a film level. It's at a film level. Do you know how hard that is? Eilfie's been on Paranormal State. How many episodes did you have? Like, a ridiculous amount. 78 or something? Or was it more than that?
Something like that. I think we got pretty close to 100 mark. But it's been a while since I've looked at it. But I mean, he has been on TV for like, was it 15 years now?
Oh, something. I mean,
Almost 20.
he's in 26 seasons or something, 27 seasons.
Yeah.
No one will ever get to that point, ever. He is, no one will, period. And so people can make fun of him all they want, but, you know, it's out of absolute jealousy, and you're right. The people that talk shit about him online, whether it's a YouTube video, podcast, whatever, y'all are just giving him free press. Y'all are just giving him more free press. And honestly, you're just helping him get bigger. And anyway, you know, as everybody knows, like, we had a friendship, and he knows what I'm capable of. I've heard him bragging about, you know, my knowledge in film and my knowledge in paranormal. I've been to this museum, God knows how many times at this point, and he knows what I've been trying to accomplish. So I hope to God that he is considering Ghost Girl Diaries for one of the series, since he is now an executive with Discovery. I hope that he is seriously taking us into consideration, because he knows about the millions of views that I've obtained. He knows about the hard work that I've done. He knows about winning all the film festivals. I know that this is really early on him just announcing it. This is just like scratching the surface. Like, he's probably not even anywhere near making plans with who he's going to sign. But I will say, since well, no, and I've already been in his circle of his private circle of friends, so I hope to God he is considering us. That's all I have to say, because not that I'm entitled, or not that I've earned it, but I mean, he knows what we're capable of, and that's it. So I just hope that I'm up for that opportunity. And then from there, Aleister Crowley has been making a huge turn again. He comes in waves in like paranormal and occult. Have you noticed that? Like, even you've been with Ghost Girl Diaries for a few years, but like, we see this pop up sometimes and he goes away. And I've noticed on social media he's having another surge of occultism. And so in the future streams with Eilfie, she's actually going to be researching more occultists, because I feel like there's so many others that don't get. There's hundreds. And Anton LaVey obviously was kind of considered one too, but as far as Aleister Crowley, like, we've talked about him before in the past, but I just feel like he didn't get the. I mean, you talk about it for a minute. You said you were doing research, and this is just like scratching the surface. There's so much information on him that I don't even think people realize about his life.
Well, there's so much information about him, but honestly, to me, it's more fascinating is all of the people after him who have done commentary, who's dissected his work, who's talked about his rituals and everything. So it's almost like it's even bigger than Crowley himself. It's his body of work, but then the body of work built on his body of work that I feel like times has really gained a much more fascination, and also just people are fascinated with this figure who you're not sure how much is truth and how much is rumor and myth, that he probably built half of it himself, really.
True. And I think that another reason this comes up in like pop culture, like current pop culture, is if you're not on TikTok, you need to be on TikTok, because I think that TikTok has created a new like spiritual surge, don't you think?
Oh, the occult TikTok, and actually I think they call it like witch talk and everything.
There's witch talk, occult talk, like there's literally like spirit guide talk, like
it's definitely caught. Like I've definitely heard a lot more people talk about the good, bad, indifferent of, is it getting information from TikTok, conveying information, is it easy, is it difficult, and everything. And it definitely, with everything, has gained more momentum because everyone is looking for this stuff, is fascinated by this stuff.
Well, and with pop culture and social media, like TikTok, it moves so fast. Like, there was something that came out that I think Forbes did a like research on like data, and TikTok is now the number one platform. It's literally surpassed Instagram and YouTube at this point because people like the short form content. And I think that people's attention spans have shrunk, which is good and bad, but it's like people are wanting all this information at once, and it's moving at such a high speed, and that's where this occultism is coming back up, and it is witch talk too. And Aleister Crowley, you know, when he died in 1947, he was famous, but for all the wrong reasons. And you're thinking about a time when he was born, you know, as an adult in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, where if you came out as spiritual occultist, his name was, you know, nicknamed Beast 666, associated with the devil, at a time, 20s, 30s, and 40s, when everyone's Catholic and Christian, he's hated, essentially. He's just hated.
I think it was more like he became this big legend, and it's like, you also have to remember the early 20th century, the occult world was not a very big pool. Like, everyone kind of knew everyone else, because that's where it's always funny when you hear about, like, these famous people like Crowley and Gardner and Leon Fortune and these various very polarizing people, and they all interacted with each other in some level because they all ran in the same circles and everything. But then you have those people outside them is then the media, like newspapers and radio and stuff, who are catching little tidbits of this information going like, oh my goodness, Beast 666. And he was just like loving it, I think. He's just like, yes, I'm the Beast, I'm super scary, and not so much.
Well, he played off of the marketing tool. I think he was a marketing genius for sure, especially for that time era when, you know, Google didn't exist, social media didn't exist. I mean, even television. Eilfie and I were talking earlier. Well, yeah, like, I mean, the newspaper was really where you got your source of information. And for him to be able to, like, understand marketing at a time where vast majority of people didn't have access to things like Google, like mass things like we do today, where information is pushed at such high speeds and high rates, he was kind of like the Kardashian of his time.
Oh, God.
I mean, right? Like, he liked the bad publicity because he didn't care. Like, publicity was still publicity. It doesn't... And I've talked about this before. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it honestly, because it I think it feels like at times where he enjoyed the publicity, even if it was like, oh my God, the wickedest man in the world and all this stuff, because often it was because one story blew up and everything. Mm-hmm. And then he utilized that probably to then try to convey the actual information he was trying to talk about. That was honestly a lot of meditation and doing rituals, and not really as scandalous as it always was thought to be.
Well, who knows with his, you know, he practiced actively, bragged about and practiced sex magic. He wrote publishing items on it, and I think that scared people, anything with the word magic, but once again, I think he liked the shock factor.
Yeah. Oh, probably. He probably got a kick out of it. I mean, this guy seemed to be a very much a social person when he wanted to be, and he was very charismatic. He was someone who, like, he could talk to probably anyone, and either they loved him or hate him. It was probably, there was no real in between with Crowley. You either love the guy or you hate the guy. You couldn't really just be like met with him.
So he was born October 12th, which I just find interesting because, you know, that's like spooky season. We all love spooky season. He's from England, but both of his parents were like hardcore Christians. And his mother is the one that nicknamed him the Beast, which I feel like, wow, you know.
Apparently he was a very pain in the butt child. Like, he was definitely just, and it sounds like he was a curious child. He wanted to get into everything. He caused a lot of trouble. And you also have to think, like, the group they were called part of, the Plymouth Brethren, sounds like they were very repressed and very much this Christian sect that was like all about this belief and everything. And it was until he went away from it when he went to Trinity College and everything, that he just kind of exploded, really.
And I hate to say that, I feel like that still happens to this day, because Kat obviously was raised extreme Catholic. She went to a Catholic school, and I have other friends that went to Catholic school, and that they kind of integrated with us in high school, and they went crazy. So I sometimes think that when you repress a child with forced religion, it does come out in other really ugly ways. Not necessarily with Kat, but like she did go the opposite way. She went like the pagan way, the witchcraft way. She was like, done with this, no more Catholic, over it, you know what I mean? And I think that people don't realize that sometimes with having that big of an impact on a kid, it might do the adverse that you're expecting it to do.
You also have to remember too, it was not just religion, but I think he was probably, they were probably very stern, they were probably very strict on rules. So when he was finally out from none of that show, you have this wealthy British boy who is going to a college on his own for the first time, probably doing what he would like to do, and just kind of finally had the release of not someone watching over his shoulder all the time. Unfortunately, this apparently had a downward effect where he left the Trinity and never got the degree.
Right. Yeah. And then he joined in like 1898 this Order of the Golden Dawn, which is, I mean, wasn't it like some sort of like weird spiritual belief system of whatever they had?
The Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn was kind of it's similar, if you ever know anything about like the OTO that comes later and everything, and it's deals with meditation, Kabbalistic, ritual magic. Some of it deals with I believe the magician Levi's work, and other earlier works. And you have to remember, Crowley was in his 20s when he joined the Golden Dawn and everything, and he excelled very quickly through their grade system, because their grade system, which is I believe similar to what you see today in the OTO, is basically the grade like through the tree of life and everything, and he like fast tracked through that. He just apparently really wanted to get through the grades really quickly, much faster than normal, but he did it. He did all the work and everything, and that's probably what kind of shocked a lot of them and everything.
Well, and Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was actually considered like an occult secret society. So, you know, I mean, probably a lower degree of like a wannabe Illuminati or something like that. Like, it was from the late 19th century. They were into paranormal activities and ghost hunting and metaphysics, which back in the day of the 19th century, like, how would you do that? I mean, there wouldn't be a lot of ways to investigate because technology just didn't exist at that time. So they were really into like spiritual practices. They would discuss Wicca practices, magical practices, and that's, I think, where he kind of got his boost of who he became. I don't really like, it's hard. Like, yes, he was an occultist, but he did so many other things. I feel like people forget that he was also a writer, a publisher. He was like a world traveler. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I think with the Golden Dawn, it wasn't like, I wouldn't put in like anything like the Illuminati secret society, anything crazy like that. It was really kind of more of a fraternity, that they were into spiritualism, into alchemy, into Kabbalistic work, into ritual work. And so this was usually this group of people who got together of like mind, and it wasn't too unusual in these circles because you had a lot of artists and authors and spiritualists and usually free thinkers who were fascinated with these topics. And so he just kind of crashed in on this, going like, I will excel beyond all of this.
Well, yeah, Illuminati is probably not the right word either, but I think it was more like a wannabe, like that big, and it wasn't, you know what I mean? But they did have like initiations, and I think they had like similar things to like the Masonic sort of like temple era. Once again, not as official. Yeah, not as official, right? It's totally, fraternity is a perfect word for that, like absolutely, you know?
Yeah, they would definitely be like related closer to like a Masonic lodge or even the Theosophical Society and everything. Since there were quite a few in that time, they came and went. They did not last long at times.
No, well, they kind of got like silenced or pushed under from society, don't you think? Just because it was not welcome.
Well, it's that, but honestly, sometimes it burned out, or lots of infighting happened, or people just did not agree on something, so they would split off and make other groups and subgroups and this and that and the other. So a lot of times it was more internal stuff splitting than honestly anything external.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that's what we've seen with the bigger ones too. Is, you know, they have like the big one, and they have all the sub ones that have split off into all these different chambers. So it does make sense. So now he's written a lot of books. Have you ever read any of his books out of just random curiosity?
Yes, I have.
You have.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to know, like, is he? I haven't. I've never even picked one of his books up. Is he intelligent? What does he talk about? Is he, you know what I mean? What perspective does he talk from?
He is very chatty. It's interesting. Like, this is why honestly I say a lot. Like, it's more interesting with the people who dissect Crowley's work, because if you sat down and just read like either the Book of the Law or Magic Theory and Practice, unless you have already a working knowledge of ceremonial magic or the occult, it might not make as much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes he kind of wrote in this mindset that whoever's picking up this book should already know how to read Hebrew or how to read Greek or what these things mean already, and just kind of like jumped full force into it. And so later on you have authors who took his work, like Lon Mayo Duquette, and essentially translated Crowley, going, okay, this is what he actually meant, or this is where he was going with, because he also he was a poet. He liked writing fiction on top of also writing works on ceremonial magic and the occult, and sometimes his poetry would meld into his ceremonial magic, and sometimes his fiction, like Diary of a Drug Fiend, which is technically fiction, technically an autobiography of when he was addicted to drugs and such. It kind of blurs at times and everything. So it's one of those, like, he's not exactly someone you can just sit down and like, I'm going to spend this weekend reading Crowley, unless you already have kind of a working knowledge of it first.
See, and I've just never, I mean, I know he wrote the one that was like inspired by Egypt, and I've never wanted to dive into that because I wasn't sure. He seems like a little bit eccentric. Is that a good word for him, where you say he's chatty, or he's just like, I have a lot of information and I'm going to get it out right now?
He definitely was an eccentric person. His poetry is actually not that bad. I enjoyed. I mean, one of his poetry books is called White Stains, and he mixes occult work in with the poetry and everything. The Book of the Law, which is what you're referring to with Egypt, is one of the big main books. It's actually not big. It's a tiny book.
Look at Eilfie. Let me just grab a book off my librarian shelf right here.
Which was actually, funny enough, I think it was last week, I think it was technically the anniversary of the writing of the Book of Law, which he when he was in Egypt, in Cairo, having with his, on honeymoon with his first wife, Rose.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he wrote through trance state over the course of 3 days the Book of the Law, and last week was the anniversary of what oftentimes people do who practice Lima is each day they will read that chapter that was written on that day, which they said it was like written one chapter a day at noon in Egypt.
So people will still to this day practice Crowley by...
Oh yeah, there's still practice.
Wow. So it's almost like its own like Crowley society that's still of existence.
Well, I wouldn't say that. There are people who are Thelemites. who practice the Lima.
Okay.
There are people who utilize the word Crowley, but that's not really
Crowley, wow.
Your central unjust Crowley, but the magic practice as a whole is considered the Lima.
Wow.
And there are still people who practice it today.
That I'm fascinated. Like, I would love to just sit down with people, like, and just pick their brain about why they practice it, what it is they. So the Book of the Law, can you sum it? Like, is it like magical practices? Like, what is it?
Well, it's interesting because in the book it says right at the beginning of it that you're supposed to just read it and never discuss it with anyone, and you're supposed to burn the book after you've read it. Of course, no one ever does that. And
Jesus.
what it was,
God, it's a little extreme.
Yeah, it was a little extreme, but some people have felt that was him trying to, like, you're supposed to read the book of law and interpret it for yourself, because it was the idea of the motto that he went by, which was, do what thou wilt shall be the whole law, love is the law, love it wilt, there is no law beyond do what thou wilt. That was the motto pulled all together.
Are you guys just fascinated with Eilfie right now? Like, I'm just so fascinated by her. Like, I love her to death because she's so smart. I'm sorry. I sometimes when you're speaking, I'm like, oh my God. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So with the book, it was this basically this tome that is a little hard to understand at times. It is supposedly he is just he was writing it through a higher spirit that he believed was possibly his holy guardian angel, which he talks about in his work, and who he referred to as Awase, and that it was supposed to talk about the Aeon of Horus. And it was this idea that we move through different eons, which various groups do talk about. Various groups talk about the idea we go through cycles and eons. I mean, like the most obvious one people talk about is the age of Aquarius and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So this talked about that we were entering in the age of Horus, which is the child, and just what to expect with that, and just talking about Nuit and Hadad and Osiris. And this is also some of the early works where we get later on with the whole Babylon and the Scarlet Woman and everything. But this is just a very small tome that you were supposed to just take in and interpret yourself and figure out to understand what your personal will was, what you were meant to do in this life or lives.
I'm fascinated. I could just hear you. I want you just to keep going. Honestly, like.
Well, like there's more to it. There's lots of.
So, do you think? And I know that you're not supposed to share your belief, but I know you will because I'm asking. What's your? Do you think it's based off of Egyptian belief system? It sounds like it might be based off, like you said, Age of Aquarius. Maybe a little bit of astrological. Maybe a little bit of Greek.
A lot of his work is a combination of Egypt, Greek. There is Hebrew. There's Jewish mysticism. Unfortunately, like it is a hodgepodge of various practices that have been kind of zoned together. And the thing is like even though there are Egyptian names and Egyptian deities mentioned, talked about, and utilized, I sometimes feel like this is a little more closer to the 19th and early 20th century of the romanticized ancient Egypt, not necessarily the actual practice of ancient Egypt, but just our interpretations of what we thought ancient Egypt would look like, or how the deities would be perceived and everything. So I think this is where you need to kind of take with a grain of salt of, even though he's using these various names and stuff, it's still more of an interpretation than a legit, this is how it is.
He sort of took belief systems from several cultures and took what he liked out of it, reinterpreted it, and then put it into his own writings.
Yeah, along with what he had learned between like the Esophageal, the Golden Dawn, and then later on he has his own group with the OTO and everything. So this is not something that he invented out of nothing. This is stuff that has definitely already been in existence magically, like of various Western occult practices. He just kind of compiled it to make his own interpretation of it.
So this is where and this is just a random fact that I know because, we've done research on Anton LaVey, and obviously Anton LaVey was the founder of the Church of Satan. And I can't remember, it starts with an E. It's a culture that's out of Africa. Do you know who I'm talking about? A lot of people accuse Anton LaVey of ripping off this culture of Satanism. And it's like EQ. I can't remember what I don't have it in front of me. Anyway, it's similar.
Yeah.
It's similar. So basically, it's claimed, and if you were to get in an argument with a Satanist, there's two types of Satanists, because I have friends that are these. There's one type that believes Anton LaVey's word is of the devil, literally, and what he created was authentic. There's another group of people that are Satanists that say, no, he ripped off an African culture and literally slapped, instead of like using the title God, slapped the name Satan on it. And literally it's a identical cultural switch. So in a way, Aleister Crowley did the same thing by creating, like what Eilfie said, Thelma, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Thelma. Thelma. And he took identities from different cultures and belief systems, stuck it in a book that was interpreted by him, which honestly lets all say that religion itself, whether you're Catholic, Christian, Lutheran, whatever, it's interpreted how you will. Isn't it all, like, interpreted at your own will?
And I think that's the big thing is his main thing with his work was trying to showcase, because I think this is oftentimes what is misinterpreted, especially with the motto and everything, that when they hear do what thou will, they're like, oh, do whatever you want. It's like, no, it's not do whatever you want. It's not cause the as much chaos as you want, or be a bad person. It is the idea that you are trying to find what you are meant to do in this universe, and what is the smoothest path of, like, this falls into place. This is what you were meant to do. This is what your purpose was and everything. And it was something that he wanted to sometimes, I think, more show that it was, you had to find out what your will was. Mm-hmm. You had to find out what your purpose was. No one could tell you. You had to do it through your own work and everything. And he was just trying to provide the tools to do it. And unfortunately, also, he sometimes kind of bragged, like, yes, I did all this stuff too. Which he did. He did the work. I mean, he did his own work. But he wanted to show, like, here's the tools, so you can also find what your will is in this universe.
Well, and another thing to point out too that people don't realize, like, because when you talk about stuff like this, you have to critically think about this person, Aleister Crowley, even like Anton LaVey, who was really big in like the 60s, 70s era, right, till he started to grow. Yeah. But even Anton LaVey too, you're at a point, and Aleister Crowley, he went to Egypt in 1904, I think, or something like that. So you have 1904, so the early 19th century, and then you have Anton LaVey in the 70s, both in which are areas of life where Google does not exist. Amazoning yourself a book on, this ancient African culture doesn't exist. So they had to go to extreme length to find, literature, literally, like, literature. I mean, literally to the point where Aleister Crowley went to freaking Egypt in 1904. So that's probably where he got most of his information at that time. But a lot of people at that time didn't have access to that literature. So when they do come out with, the Book of Satan or whatever Aleister Crowley's doing, it's new to them because they've never seen the literature from other cultures.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's like you also have to remember, like I said, in the early 20th century, there was this huge buzz about Egypt. Like, if you look at, there was this Egyptian revival where there was fashion and architecture, and everyone just loved, because it wasn't too long. It was shortly after, like, the finding of King Tut's tomb, and the people were finding all these amazing artifacts of Egypt. And unfortunately, this is also when a lot more of ancient Egypt was getting pillaged and taken and sold and everything, and people just looked at it as like, oh, this is beautiful stuff. And Crowley came there at the honeymoon, and This is where he wrote the Book of the Law. This is also where he found the Stella Revealum, which it was in the Egyptian Museum. He felt was this connection that he needed with his magic, because also the I think the archive tag on the back of it was 666. So he's like, this had to be a sign. This is meant to be, and everything, which is just fascinating. But this was, like you said, they didn't have Google. It was kind of a privilege if you could get a hold of any of these occult books. You kind of had to join these societies or these fraternities to gain access to these pamphlets and these books. It wasn't something you could just pop down to your local library and get either. I mean,
no, they were banned at a lot of libraries too, because they didn't want people, especially.
They probably didn't last long in a library. If anyone found them in a library, they probably disappeared quite quickly too. But I mean, today we honestly have a whole. We're kind of spoiled when it comes to these books. I mean, a lot of these books now are much easier access. Either they're free domain, or you can order them off Amazon or any bookstore, and they come with you in a few days. It was not that easy for people back then. They kind of had to hunt this down, or know people who had copies of it and everything. So it was a much more difficult thing to gain this knowledge than it is today.
Someone asked, so everyone's spiritual journey is different. No, essentially what Eilfie is saying, as interpreted by Aleister Crowley, is interpret it as you will. Interpret it as you will. Interpret any religion, or especially particularly the Book of the Law, which is what we're talking about. Which is why Eilfie says in the book, it says to burn it when you're done. Which once again is very extreme. Woo, let's go have a bonfire in the backyard. You know what I mean?
I think he wanted people to interpret for themselves as they will, because it was supposed to be like between them and their higher self, or them and their spiritual path. But also, he probably didn't want people to use it and misinterpret it or misuse it, and like, I don't know, pull quotes of it. Like, well, the book law says this. It's like, no, that's not how you're supposed to use it.
That's not, yeah, exactly. It's not how you're supposed to use it. He was also essentially trying to stay from modern day religion by saying interpret it as you will.
It's interesting. He was trying to stay away from modern day religion, but if you look at some of the stuff, especially like even today's, like the some of the ceremonies, it's still, I mean, it still falls into a lot of modern day religions, language or path or way. I mean, like, he utilizes his title as the Beast from the book of Revelations of the Bible and everything. So even though he was trying to get away from it, he still used it for his own work too. I mean, that's also where you get Babylon and the Scarlet Woman was from the book of Revelations of the woman who is on the back of the seven-head beast, which that's where he was turned, that he was the seven-head beast and the Scarlet Woman was this embodiment of everything to gain even gain connection to a higher self.
So spiritualism. I mean, it's really what it came down to. Spiritualism.
It's all back to spiritualism.
It's all back to spiritualism.
Back to
well, and then I found out too. We're bouncing around for a second, but that's fine. That's how our streams go. We always tangent. I didn't realize till today that he designed his own deck of tarot cards and released them, and you can still buy them today.
Oh yeah, I have one.
You do? Are they? Yeah. Are they close?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, Eilfie, I love it.
I think they're paired.
Oh my gosh, so you do have them?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is, now what's nice is actually they do come in smaller size. They don't, it's not like, you don't have to get the gigantic ones.
Right.
But these are like, some of these are beautiful cards. This was designed, he thought, like, I think this is what all tarot creators get this idea, like, yeah, we're going to like bang this out in 3 months, it'll be great. It more took like, I think, 4 to 5 years.
Well, yeah, at that time, you know, I don't know what year he designed them, but that couldn't have been an easy task back then.
Well, this was also later in his life. I think it was between 1938 and 1943. It was when he worked with Lady Harris, I think was her name, Lady Frida Harris, who was the artist. And basically, she would make the pieces, send it to him. He would make notes on it, and then send it back and forth and everything. And so I think these are supposed to be like full-scale watercolor not watercolor, but full scale paintings.
Right.
And
Wow.
then, so it took a while to get it down what he wanted, and unfortunately, if I remember correctly, even though the Book of Thoth, the book that goes with the tarot cards, was published in his lifetime, I don't think the cards were officially published until after his death.
Okay. Wow. Thanks to Jeff Bezos. Nope.
But they are very useful. They are awesome cards.
You do like it? So do you connect with them since you do?
Oh yeah, no, they're definitely they're much they're more complex sometimes. I mean, I feel like all tarot cards, like, there's more layers to them than we when we first look at them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people will use these more for ritual work, for altar work and everything. Like, you'll have the Rider-Waite-Smith, but then they'll have the Thoth, and it will be a much more specific ritual set of cards than the Rider-Waite-Smith, which might be just for readings and such.
I don't know, I'm fascinated. I'm like, I was not expecting you to pull out the tarot deck. I'm like, what?
I came prepared.
You were ready to go. Eilfie's always prepared, man. I mean, his information just goes on and on. So the sex magic thing, like, I just feel like my morbid curiosity has to, like, dive into that for a second. You know what I mean? Now, I was doing some research on my own just because I was like, what? Like, I didn't realize he was really enthralled that much with it. But he claimed, like, it was sort of after the Egypt trip was really what triggered the sex magic thing. And he...
No, I think it was him and his wife and his work with it. And well, you also have to remember he got into yoga and he got into the meditation yoga.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh because I do yoga, obviously, but it's just, I read that, like, he like matched the sex magic with, like, meditation and yoga, and I was like, it's just okay, you know what I mean? Like, okay, like, what? He's just a strange person.
Well, this is what I find most fascinating by him, because here's a figure, he like swings back and forth, where on one side he can be totally indulgent, like, I swear, like, try to break all 7 sins at once and just, like, go wild and crazy, like, that's where you get, like, directly and everything. But then he could swing all the way back, and you see photos of him, like, very thin and almost emaciated because he's been doing the fasting and the cleansing and the yoga meditations and everything, and just gets locked into this ritual stuff and the sex magic and everything. So, like, he swings back and forth between them. There's, like, no... I think it wasn't until later in his life he kind of got to a middle ground almost.
Yeah, I was looking up photos of him because he was addicted to heroin for a while too, and I'm sure other drugs were involved. You know, diving into that dark era. But it is interesting. If you look at the photos of him, you're right. There are photos where he's just totally like a skeletal person. There's like nothing left of him. And then all of a sudden he looks like he's overweight and in like a suit. And like it was like that much of weight fluctuations. But I mean, obviously he did it for his spiritual practices. But it couldn't have been healthy, right? To be like bouncing back and forth to those extreme measures.
He probably had a effect on him. Well, I mean, you also have to remember he traveled all over the world. He got into... he didn't just go to Egypt, but he also went to, I think, India and Tibet.
Italy.
He went to the U.S. He went to Italy. He got kicked out of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
That says something when you can get kicked out of an entire country and they're like, yeah, don't come back.
Well, and there were a lot of negative, I mean, I want to say publishings because once again, we're still talking about newspaper era, you know what I mean? Like that's how news traveled, was newspaper. But he would get a lot of bad press, bad publicity for the sex magic and promoting it, and he would do publishings on it as well. And he loved the bad publicity. He thrived in the bad publicity because he knew people were talking. That's where I'm talking about going back to the Kardashian theory, is really put your mindset in the 1920s, 30s, even before that. There, you know, a lot of people lived very square, clean-cut lives because that was all that really fit into society's standards. And for him to be this, like, total extreme side of, like, oh yeah, I went to Egypt, I practice sex magic, I have orgies, I do all this crazy shit. And then people are, like, haggling him on a really, like, demonizing level of, like, literally, you are Satan himself in the flesh. And he was like, yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yeah.
And I think, honestly, that's probably... I would not be surprised if, like, Angela Levey probably took some notes from that, going like, that seems like a good idea.
I agree. I was thinking that today, because I was reading through, like... And, you know, we're not going to divulge into, like, details, but let me just say, if you want some tea, go research his sex magic stuff, because you're just, like, once again, for somebody to figure this stuff out, and I'm not discrediting Egypt, like, Kat is obsessed with Egypt. She swears she lived a past life in Egypt. She's a Lyran from Egypt. I think I'm from Atlantis. But, like, I laugh because I know that their spiritual practices are hardcore and probably involving sex magic. But for him to, like, publish these detailed things in the, like, 20s and 30s of, like, sex magic, it was just like, wow, he literally did not care. He didn't give a F. He was going to tell everybody what he learned and saw and experienced, and he's going to tell you how to experience it as well on a very public platform.
Oh yeah, I mean, like he was a wealth. I mean, he inherited quite a wealth from his father, so that's why he was able to travel. So he was a wealthy British man who probably very few people told him, no, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that, like in anything. And I think sometimes also, in some ways, this very outer, extreme shock factor of the sex magic and everything, even though, yes, there is rituals dealing with sex magic and tantric and all that, I think that almost it's like you have to get past that before you start really getting delved into his other lectures and talks and works. Like, I mean, like with the yoga, like he did a lecture, like, I would say it's probably like very outdated at this point, but he has like the 8 limbs of yoga lecture that he did that is just mostly breathing exercises and poses, really, and nothing too extreme. It's probably about the same as you would see today.
Now, near the end of his life, I was reading about this today too, he was sort of seen as a medium too. So that was when he claimed he was connecting like with his higher self, his guides, his angelic forms. Do you think he was actually a medium?
See, the possibility, like, it sounds like when towards the end of his life, he was definitely slowing down. I think he was in the UK at that point. He had a small apartment. Like, there's always been this big thing. It's like, oh, he died in obscurity and poverty. It's like, no, he still had correspondence. He still had people in the US and UK talking to him. He honestly was just kind of slowing down and probably focusing more inward on his magical practices and going beyond what he probably had been working on before in his early years, and it wasn't as flashy as probably what people expected and everything. I mean, he also had to think too, this is when he was working on the tarot deck, so he was probably doing more research and more introspective work, because if you look at the cards he created, they're beautiful cards, and there's so many layers of ritual and occult knowledge in those too.
Well, and someone asked, what would he be considered in today's society? More like, once again, comparing to Anton LaVey, he sort of created his own spiritual movement. But, I mean, most modern, even Eilfie has this on the list, is Ron Hubbard, founder of Scientology. 100%. It's like creating your own mysticism, spiritualism. Whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter. There's people out there that do. Eilfie just said people still follow Crowley and literally still practice his practices to this day. And so no, I think he was more impactful than people realize. And he does make these circle rounds every once in a while on social media. We see this upsurge of him, and we're all in group chat like, here comes Aleister Crowley again. It's interesting how people get fascinated by these occultists and that it comes in waves because, yes, he was well known back then, obviously enough to create his own tarot deck, to go to all of these places because he had a lot of money, which a lot of people at that time didn't have the money to travel abroad like he did. But he wasn't very liked at that time. It's interesting how later on occultists become even more famous after their death, many, many years after their death.
Well, there was that. Honestly, if Crowley was alive today, I don't think a lot of people would like him so much, and I don't think he would care if anyone liked him.
But is that's the same stating with Ron Hubbard and Anton LaVey? I mean, it's similar. Not a lot of people are going to like them, but you're right. That's a perfect statement for it.
No, and I mean, like, okay, so a similar artist I could see who I don't think has gone, who's definitely not for Crowley, but he has very similar, appearance is, if you ever seen the comic book writer Alan Moore, who is also a occultist and everything, and has actually done some great work threading the occult into his fiction and everything. He looks like the wizard. He looks like quintessential wizard. He has long gray beard and long gray hair, and he's this very punk-looking wizard with all these rings. And he's very, like, visually he looks like what you expect, but he's also done the work too, and does know his stuff and everything, but he also knows that people are more visual and that, like, they want to see the wizard. So it probably would not be dissimilar if Crowley was around today. He'd probably be a lot more flashier too.
No, it's true. I agree with that. And although Eilfie's read his books, she doesn't practice this. You know what I mean? But even me, I don't practice it. I haven't read his books, but I'm interested in it on a paranormal occult level because he is an occultist. And whether you believe in what his belief system is or not, this is what makes our genre real, paranormal, and occult. It's creepy, weird things, and we appreciate the creepy weirdness in people. Doesn't mean that we have to follow it or practice it, right?
Well, I mean, I'll have to admit, I do practice some ceremonial magic.
No, right. I meant, like, specifically. I mean, girl, if you do sex magic, that's on you. You know what I'm saying? No.
I mean, like okay, so like the lesser banishing ritual on the lake and everything.
Right.
I do practice some of it, but it's one of those things where it's interesting where Thelema can be a religion or a philosophy. It's all up to how the person wants to interpret it.
We're going back to interpretation again, 100%.
Yes, it all comes to interpretation.
Yep, and that's why I should read at least the one book at some point, just because I'm interested in it. But I feel like it's going to be like the Necronomicon, and I think the Necronomicon's just straight up rituals in there, you know what I'm saying? Like, but a lot of people are like, oh no, it was a fictional book, and I'm like, okay, whatever.
Oh, honestly, I think that's been like, there's a whole lot of layers to that.
Oh yeah, it is, and yeah, definitely, for sure, and that's also looking at H.P. Lovecraft. A lot of people see him. Some people see him as an occultist. Some people see him as just a writer and a poetry person. You know what I mean? And once again, it's up for interpretation.
Which is so weird because Lovecraft himself, like, he would have not liked any of the occult. Like, he would claim off, like, no of that. But then you read stuff, it's like, are you sure? I
know. Yeah, I'm more fascinated with Lovecraft than I am with, like, Aleister Crowley. I'm not a huge Crowley fan. I'm not a huge Anton LaVey fan, although I find it interesting once again because we're in this genre of occult. Isn't it just interesting how people's brains work? I feel like, and like once again, this man is in 1904 going to Egypt. Like, how in the hell do you get to Egypt in 1904? You know what I mean? Like,
he went into the pyramids too. Like, he went into one of the main pyramids and did his, like, I don't think you can do that today. I don't think you can just walk into the pyramids today and do anything. But apparently back then he could do that. He could just walk in. He did his ritual with his wife and everything, and then later on, that's when we get the Book of Law. But I'm like, wait a minute, you just like strolled on in there. Like these days, it's all like plexiglass and like guided. Like,
and most of it's, I think, blocked off. I think most of it's blocked off because they don't want it to be defaced or anything like that. So,
but like Nigel Farr is like, yep, I'm going into the pyramid.
No, and that's the fascinating part is reading it from a perspective from somebody 100 years ago, literally.
Yeah, it's so good. I think one of the things where I think because people see the titles like the Wickedest Man and the Beast and everything, they kind of get scared off. And I feel like if you're going to read, especially the history of the occult or even anything dealing with the fringe of it, Crowley is definitely someone like you don't even have to like him because there is a lot of stuff about him that is not likable. I mean, because he was so outspoken, he said not good things about people. Like he was very, in a lot of ways, for his intelligence, also very bigoted too. But he's definitely someone you should at least be aware of when researching.
That's also a sign of his times, though, isn't it? I mean, once again, you're talking the 19th century.
Yeah, and the thing is I think we have to remember it's like he was still human. He would probably be the first to say he was no saint. So he was still very much a human and made mistakes and not perfect and everything. And I think it's one of those things where trying to understand like how much can you absorb from it and also separate it from the author, but also realize this person probably would not be someone you would want to sit down and like have a chat with either.
Right. Oh my God.
So
I'm just saying you should research some stuff. That's all I'm saying. If you're interested, I do. Like, I encourage you guys because there's some things we just cannot talk about on here. But I was curious myself. I'm just curious because it's once again.
Pop culture.
You're talking about somebody that like came up with this theory in his interpretation of his own occult world, whatever, in a time where Google doesn't exist. That's what's fascinating to me. Is we depend on the World Wide Web for literally, we're streaming online right now. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have, we've had 200 people, live last week on our stream. If we didn't have that, how did he obtain this information and how he got the information, then how he interpreted it and wrote it in the book, and then how you interpret it? It's fascinating to me. The whole thing's just fascinating to me.
I mean, like, okay, so one of his most well-known books that's still published today is called 777, and it's Kabbalistic work, and basically it is in some ways Google in a book where it has all the various charts and diagrams of like breaking down of all the tree of life and the
now this is the one that I was questioning you about, right? When we first started talking about it, I said he had the 7 portals or something like that. Okay, so this is the one I'm fascinated about. So everybody listen to Eilfie right now, okay? Because this one's most well-known. It was also featured on Ghost Adventures. It's been on other ones. And it's literally a ritualistic system, right? Of like the 7 gates. Okay, I'm going to let Eilfie take over. This I have to listen to. I'm sorry, it's important.
So the book 777 is this collection of all these charts and diagrams of these. It's not so much like here is the ritual, but here's how you can create your ritual. Because a lot of times with ceremonial magic, you're going by the hour of the planet, the day, if a certain deity or spirit you're trying to work with, magical squares and everything. So the book itself is he tried to compose a lot of that information into sort of easy to read charts to then you could use that as a reference to then create your ritual space, because before Google people usually had to have 4 or 5 books open as they're trying to research stuff or look up stuff and everything. So this is why 777 is still a very popular book today, because it's still considered a good resource book, though even though probably some of it would need to be updated today. It was one of his big books because here is your Google to now look up, well, what planet, hour of a planet do I need to be, and what metal do I need, and what square do I need, and everything compiled all in one.
To basically perform these like rituals or something, right? Like or open doorways is I think one of the words that he'd worded it before.
Yeah, if you wanted to open your own doors or use magic squares or contact a certain spirit, this was because that's the other thing with ceremonial magic. It can be very precise. Of like you gotta get the right day, hour, planet, everything down to the minute. If you're getting really like detail oriented.
And once again, he had this created before Google existed. So it does make you wonder if he was in touch with his guides or whoever on the other side. For him to, I know he researched, but to obtain this information and to be able to reinterpret it into a black and white paged book for us is just insanity to me.
I think it was like he had the access to the information, and he had to. I think it's more impressive also that he had to know how to compile it into something semi-digestible and everything. I mean, one of the other people who was his secretary for a time, Israel Regardi, also who published quite a lot of this work, and I would highly recommend if you're looking into anything dealing with ceremonial magic, Israel Regardi is definitely someone to look into as well. He published the book The Golden Dawn, and people apparently flipped their lid because they're like, oh my god, you're publishing our secrets, how can you do that, you're revealing everything. And he's like, this should be open to everyone, why not? Either they'll get it or they won't get it.
In other words, he didn't believe in gatekeeping information.
No, he had no. He felt like everyone, if you could get the book, and I think he also really believed in that idea with the occult. The word occult itself is hidden knowledge, and the hidden part of it is you could have the book in front of you, but unless it like you have the aha moment, it might not make any sense to you. And he thought like, well, I'm going to publish a book, and there will be people who will utilize it. It should not be for only so many certain people or anything.
Interesting. Now, you put something else in the notes about So Mote It Be. Was that created by Crowley?
No, I believe that was Gardner.
Gardner.
Gardner, who was the as they call it, the father of Wicca and everything. He was another figure who liked utilizing the press and everything, especially once the UK abolished the law against witchcraft and everything. He just like hit the ground running when it came to like doing a whole bunch of press and everything about witchcraft and Wicca and everything like that. But that one's interesting because that was dealing later on with the pop culture of I believe it was Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin. Yep, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody said, do you put Christianity as a cult or a religion? Once again, I feel like this is based on interpretation, on hidden knowledge, like what Eilfie said. So I'll give you a perfect example for this. There are documentaries done on the original tablets of the Bible. You know, there's also hundreds of versions of the Bible and how it's been interpreted. And it's claimed that the original tablets were written in old times, literally on stone tablets, and it was reinterpreted in the Middle East. So Kat and I have done a lot of research on the originalities of like where the Bible came from, and Kat and I, personally, this doesn't include Eilfie, she may believe this, she may not, but we believe that it was interpreted in a male interpretation because they were trying to put women below men. So it just, once again, it depends on your interpretation of it. Kat was raised extremely Catholic. I was raised Lutheran. Eilfie was raised pagan. I no longer practice religion, and Eilfie's still pagan, and Kat does witchcraft. So it just, you know, it depends on your interpretation of it. You have to figure out what knowledge works for you and how you interpret it and how you understand it. There's really no right or wrong answer for that, I think. Is that a good, yeah. Basically, do you think Christianity is considered a cult or a religion?
I wouldn't say as a whole. I mean, there are definitely Christian cults who, like you were saying, it's the interpretation and unfortunately sometimes misinterpretation of scriptures that have.
But that could be any scripture, though. It doesn't have to just be Christianity. It could be any scripture.
Any scripture can honestly end up being misused, and I think that's unfortunately that's where the human side of it comes in, where you could have a scripture that is written by a person and then translate and retranslate, and then someone takes it and they interpret it however they want, and then unfortunately it could start off as a good thing and then unfortunately go down.
Well, that's how we have so many different religions, right? Like, that's why we have so many different, like, sprouts from, you know, Catholicism and Christianity. There's all these different different religions and how people, that's literally how it happens.
Different opinions and difference of ideas of how these pieces were interpreted, how they should be interpreted, who gets to interpret it and everything. And actually what you were talking about earlier, a lot of that I think came from when they were compiling it to make the Bible with like, I think it was the
Babylonians? I can't remember.
Yeah. No, it was the Icean meeting or conference of Icean. I can't remember the proper, where they were deciding what scriptures would now be the canon scriptures and what would later we would consider the Bible, because you have the Old Testament, which is the 5 books of Moses, and then you have later on the New Testament, and then that later on gets
reinterpreted again.
Translated further, when you have like the King James Bible, which interprets it however King James.
Once again, just keeps reinterpreting it. That's why I always say when people ask me if I've read the Bible, I'm like, well, there's like 200 versions. Which one are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I had to learn the hard way, because it's like when you look up like, oh, I want like what I'm looking for like Bible stuff. It's like, oh, what version do you want? Like, what how many translations are there?
I'm
like,
sorry.
It all depends. You want like word for word, or you don't? Do you want like more of a interpretation of these? And it's like, oh my.
It's interesting. Not that this matters, is a little off tangent, but that's what we do. You know what I mean? But my mom's been communicating with me through dreams since she passed away, and she's very forthcoming with information. And I was, and I mean, my dreams are so vivid, and I'm so connected to my spirit team and stuff. Like, it's crazy. Like, I've told Eilfie some of these dreams, and she's just like, I don't even know. Like, how do you remember all this, you know?
I'm glad you're writing all this down, too.
Oh, I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book right now. But one of the little tidbits of information that I'll release now, but, you know, my guides don't really want me to, but I'm going to do it anyway, is religion is a human thing. Religion doesn't really exist on the other side, no matter what you look at it as. There is something. I asked my mom, I said, so does God exist? You know, like, what is God? And she called it the source. She doesn't call it him. It is more female or they than it is a him. It's definitely not a him. But she said it's just how humans interpret it. It's how humans believe it. We're one of the youngest civilizations in planets, basically, that exist. But they don't call it God. They don't call it a him. It's called the source, which is where we all come from. And as far as like, so, and I said in my dream, I was like, is Christianity, like, what are we supposed to believe in? You know, like, what's the all being? Well, my guides don't want to answer that because they don't want to frustrate anybody. Like, in other words, we have free will. Eilfie has free will to practice paganism. Kat has free will to practice witchcraft. There is no right or wrong answer. But religion doesn't exist. Hell doesn't exist. We're incarnating here to have a human experience, and that's it. And we're not going to go home and be judged. The fear-mongering that happened here is all human-based, period. But once again, that can also be...
That frustrates people to only one answer.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I think that's part of the experience of being here, is like being a part of a society, being part of a culture, a clan, a group, a religion, organization. It makes you feel like of a belonging, because we do incarnate here, and it's a hard planet to incarnate on, and so you have to feel like you have a belonging somewhere. So that's where I think my guides don't want anyone to feel frustrated. But I'm like, well, and they're like, we want you to write it in a book, but people can also interpret that how they will as well, So it's just interesting. It's if you have that connection with the other side, And researching occultists won't stop whether there's religion or not. I'm obsessed with this stuff. I think it's fascinating. So, okay, question for you. Since you have read some of Crowley's books, oh God, this is a hard question to ask. Where do you think what's the easiest place to start if somebody's out there and wants to read a Crowley book? Is there an easy place to start?
Well, okay, I guess the question would be, okay, if they're starting with wanting to begin with Ceremonial Magic? Like,
okay, so my two, I think the two biggest books that he's done, and I'm sure you'll agree, is 777 and what's the one from Egypt that he did? I forgot.
Book of the Law?
Book of the Law. So since those are the two most popular books, where do you need to be mentally to be able to read them? What do you need to be preparing yourself for to be able to interpret it?
I would say with the 777, that's more of a reference book where it's one of those, like, it's definitely not a bad one to have on your shelf for if you're doing research and if you're trying to understand things. So for books on Crowley, I honestly would recommend Lon Milo Duquette has done a lot of work, especially talking about Crowley and Crowley's work, interpreting him. Like, he has done book on the Book of Thoth, he's done his book on Enochian magic.
Oh my god, Enochian! That is... Enochian is the one that...
I'm not Enochian.
I kept saying the E word. That is Enochian culture is what they believe Anton LaVey's The Church of Satan was based off of. Thank you very much. Jesus, take the wheel. My God. Okay, anyways. Like halfway through the stream, you're like, you got me. It's fine. I don't know.
Let me see. What other would be...
Poetry books, right? Maybe some of his poetry books to sort of dip your toe in the deep end.
Poetry books, like, oh god. So the Book of Lies is one of his poetry books, but it's also poetry and occult. His ritual work kind of like melded together. Mm-hmm. If you have no foundation of his work, it would honestly just read his poetry. His other one is called White Stains. So those, I would say, would give you an idea of his like thought process in some ways. He was very wordy, flowery and wordy. I mean, I do like some of his poetries and stuff, but that might give you some...
It's like an introduction into who he is as a writer, kind of.
A little bit, yeah. It would give you an idea. Now, the thing is, you have to remember, too, because he's writing from an early 20th century, and English writing and stuff, it might be a little more difficult to interpret at times or understand the flow of it. His book, Confessions of Aleister Crowley, is an interesting book. It's a big book that he wrote, I think, in the late 20s or so. Take everything he writes, just take with a grain of salt. Just do that. Just take it with a grain of salt, whatever he writes. Mm-hmm. Because he does like telling stories. You do get at least a good idea about him and everything, but it is him writing about himself, so, you know, he might embellish a few things.
Right. We definitely think he did that. Same with he did a book basically when he was hooked on drugs as well, didn't he?
He did a book about after he was hooked on drugs. Oh. It was Diary of a Drug Fiend. I think he called fiction, but was probably a little more autobiography.
Could you be more honest, man? He's just like, let me tell you what it's like. Have you read that one?
I've not read that one yet. Another fictional book he did, which is sort of fiction, sort of not, is Moonchild. That was definitely much more fiction, whereas the idea of creating trying to create a child with magic and everything, that goes back to the sex magic thing, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Crowley, we get it. We get it.
Yeah, he was all about that.
Oh, man. He's an interesting dude, though.
I think one of the reasons why he's coming back up is people rediscovering the fact that he was like bisexual, that because everyone keeps thinking about like him and Scarlet Women and his couple's wives and his mistresses and the women he was with, but he was actually also with men because he was very fluid. It didn't really matter to him masculine or feminine or male or female or anything like that. Mm-hmm.
And back then, that was, I mean, really until recently, it was accepted, honestly, like within the last 10 years, and we're still struggling.
Well, I think people had more of a problem with that than his magic, and actually, you could think it might be a little dangerous for him to do it, because even back then, especially in the early 20th century, I think if you could still be tried and arrested for being LGBTQ+. Like, you could still be arrested. I mean, Oscar Wilde was arrested for it and served, I think, 3 years or so, and that just almost totally destroyed him and everything.
It's crazy how far we've come. It's crazy how far we've come. But I'm fascinated. I mean, I'm not going to be practicing anything Aleister Crowley, but I am fascinated by him. I do want to buy some books because I have not read his books. I'm interested. Yeah, I haven't. I haven't read the... So which one do you think I should get first? Think I should try a poetry book first?
Okay, Israel Regardie's Middle Pillar.
Okay.
Which is more of an exercise in, like, especially working with the Tree of Life and Kabbalistic work, is much more of a meditation and centering exercise than anything else. So I would definitely recommend the Middle Pillar. Honestly, a lot of Regardie's work would be good to read.
The best start, okay.
Garden of Pomegranate, Middle Pillar, the Golden Dawn book. Actually, the Golden Dawn book would be good because that would give you a better idea of what Crowley went through ceremonially, because it breaks down all the various levels and degrees they will go through too.
See, in the ceremonial stuff, I think is where I'm kind of curious, because I have seen the 777 book brought up multiple times on paranormal shows. So for him to be so still idolized by paranormal people to where they're using it in rituals and even like conjuring or contacting the dead, that's where my fascination with Aleister comes in.
Well, and it's strange too, because if you do a search about OTO, which is still around and everything, there's still lodges like in California and Ohio and everything. If you do, that is more the kind of large public space and everything. They do this thing called the Gnostic Mass, and
is it kind of like Black Mass with the Church of Satan?
It's definitely in the same vein of it, but it's much more. I mean, you have you have a person that is kind of like, it's almost this breakdown of a person going through the phases of becoming a magician, and it ends with them in front of the altar, where there is sometimes a woman on the altar representing Newark and representing Babylon and everything. But it's very reminiscent of almost a Catholic Mass in some ways too, because they do have a cup of wine, and they do have well, not a wafer, but what they call a cake of light. And it is a similar interpretation, but it's very kind of subdued and not really like Hollywood, like
really?
What people think when they, yeah, it's pretty. It's a nice little ceremony when you see it, because it's just a mass, and it's just the going through the process of the becoming a magician and the working your way to the top of encountering your higher self and crossing abyss and everything. So it's not like what people think, like with Church of Satan, when you had Antoine LaVey and the Black Mass, and the big more media publicity of it.
See, and I think that this is a perfect place to end the stream, because we could keep going forever, because he's got so much stuff in his background. But what people don't realize with paranormal, like even for example when we shot the feature in February, it's not just about interacting with the entities, but you're going to locations where there's a whole different culture, and there's different cultures involved. And that's the part too that I feel like hasn't been shined on as much in the paranormal world, is how much culture affects or affected that location, and why it's so haunted with whatever it's haunted with. And you do have to, and I think that's why I love you love history even more than me, but going to these haunted locations that are so old, you're literally stepping back into that time. And that's the part I think that's so fascinating, is even bringing up Aleister Crowley, is when you like write a book, or even like artists that are making a record, they're literally like leaving their stamp in time at that moment. And that's why we're so lucky, is 100 years later we can reference back to these Aleister Crowley books. And it's like, and I think that's the problem why I get frustrated with cancel culture, is a lot of times these old artists from like another time will get canceled because they were misogynistic or whatever. And it's like, look, I don't agree with misogyny either, but this is a whole different timestamp when this occurred, literally like 100, 200 years ago. The world was different. The world was different. I mean, literally, the world was different in the 90s. Let's be real. The world was different in the 80s. And that's evolution. And that's why I think I don't like cancel culture, because it's like, I appreciate the history. No, I don't agree with certain things that occurred at that time. But that's why and how we've evolved to where we are today.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of those where it's not so much, it's not even a matter because you have to look at, like you said, the framework of the time period of where he was, who he was. And it's not even a matter, like, we're not going to justify it, forgive, like, dude said some bad things, did some bad things. But it's more like putting it in a perspective of, like, okay, here's his information. Don't be like Crowley, but here's his information.
Don't be like him, but it's kind of cool that he wrote this at the time, but don't be like him, okay?
Be aware of what he was.
Be aware, yeah, see him for what he was, but appreciate, I mean, writings and publishings are art. It is art, whether you like it or not, you know? And that's where you have to appreciate the history.
Yeah, and I think too often we want to put people, well-known people, up on pedestals. We want to put them up high, like as if they cannot do anything wrong. It's like, no, they are human. They're going to do a whole lot of wrong. That's why they make the art.
Exactly. Well, that's why, and let's be real, sex magic or not, whatever, how dark it was. There's a reason he was a dark person, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, and what you're right. Nobody on this planet is perfect. Nobody incarnates perfect. Nobody does everything perfectly 100% of the time. And you're right. That's why you're able to create things is through trauma, unfortunately, right? That's what I did with.
Certainly not looking to become Buddha or Christ or anything like
No,
that.
no. And there is a fine line, you know, where you do compare him. And he stated that, though, that and once again, saying, I want to burn this book, once you read it, burn it. He didn't really, that's why there is a difference between someone like him and like Anton LaVey, who actually opened, you know, like the Church of Satan, wanted followers, wanted people to worship him. Even Ron Hubbard, for that same personality, creating Scientology. And Aleister Crowley did not want really people, he didn't really want people to follow him. He wanted you to burn it and just like, it is what it is, whatever. He wasn't looking for, so it's the same, but like different.
Yeah, he did his thing. Either you were with him or get out of his way, honestly.
Or he didn't care. Yeah, literally, like, I just don't care. And if you want to talk bad about me, great, thanks for the free press, that part alone, just because I have a fascination with marketing because of Ghost Girl Diaries, is just amazing to me that he had that idea in the 19th century. Like, he was he wasn't a good person, let's be real. Like, you know, do your own research. He was not a good person. However, he was ahead of his time. And he was smart. He was intelligent. He may not have done things a good way, the way he could have done or should have done. But once again, I think he was a product of his time, and early 19th century, it is what it is. And, you know, think about this too. He did inherit a ton of money for that time, which was why he was able to travel the world so freely and literally didn't have a job but my point is
this is why he could do all the things.
Right.
He didn't have to work on anything.
No, but if you inherit that kind of money at the end of the day, what are you going to do with yourself? And he was literally like, I'm going to go to Egypt, I'm going to write crazy books, I'm going to talk about sex magic, I'm going to do what I want, and it just doesn't matter. And, like, I don't care. So I guess it's interesting. It's just interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, God. The Titanic sinking 110 years ago. I would agree with Krystal. It's stamping in time. Yeah, it's, I mean, it's weird. You have to look at things from the perspective of when they happened. I mean, in fact, Eilfie and I were talking about this the other day. She was like, you know, when she was on Paranormal State, she did all these episodes, and she was like, oh my God, we didn't even have the technology, you know, that we have today. And that was literally not even 10 years ago, right? I mean, like, you realize how much things change over time, and people don't realize that by, like, putting it in perspective. That's why I like to, like, my mom used to say, paint a picture. Paint a picture. Well, that was a good stream. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I would say don't be afraid. Read read Crowley, take what you can from it, leave the rest.
Well, yeah, it's just like Anton LaVey. Like, just because you're reading a book on the Church of Satan doesn't make you a Satanist, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Like, let's evolve past that at this point. Just because you're if you just
open the portal to hell or anything, you're fine.
That's a mood.
You'll be fine.
I mean, it could happen, but like you have to be pretty intentional with that, you know.
If you have any of those books you don't want anymore, send them to me.
Oh my God, Elfie's like, please look at my library, okay? I have an abundance.
I'll take them. I'll happily take them off your hands if you don't want to be worried about that.
Oh my God, Elfie's our in-house librarian, literally. So, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in with us. Next week it's going to be Kat and I. And I think we have an interesting stream. We're going to talk about, well, we have a couple topics on, but, you know, something else went viral on TikTok that we want to talk about, which is, it's this ceremony that MGK and Megan Fox came out saying that they did. They participated in, like, Belize or something. I can't remember. Elfie laughs. And basically you take this, like, you know, herb, it's a tea, and it causes you to have, like, severe hallucinations. And yeah, we have a lot of opinions on that. And you have, like, a spiritual experience, apparently. Like, literally Megan Fox said she traveled to hell and back. And it's supposed to be a 7-day cleanse with this special tea with this, like, shaman.
Wait, you tripped them for 7 days?
Well, or, like, I think they have different, you can do, like, 4 days or 3 days. Apparently, like, Megan Fox said she did 2 or 3 days, and she said she literally couldn't do it for a 3rd day because she thought she was not going to come back to her body. So, anyway, I just found, it's going to be an interesting stream because we've been kind of researching it. Kat and I, by the way, would never, ever participate in something like that. First of all, I am a control freak when it comes to myself. I've never tried drugs because I do not like the feeling of being out of control. I don't. And so, yeah, do I want to experience going to hell and back? No, I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Try again next time. You know what I'm saying?
I'm glad to hear, though, that they had someone, like, monitoring this, because that's the only thing I'm ever worried about. Is, like, I don't mind the spiritual using of the stuff as long as you have someone monitor. Don't just offhand, like, I'm going to go trip balls for 7 days.
Jesus.
It's not going to end well.
I can't. Woo. I was not expecting you to say that. No, it's a monitored process, and and I'm not promoting it by any means. I'm just wanting to talk about it because it's been all over TikTok, and also it's not a drug. It's a tea that they give you. It's literally an herbal tea, and it's produced by a shaman in this tribe, and you literally have to go to Central America in order to take it, and you are monitored. But it just, the whole process sounds terrifying to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's supposed to, like, purge your inner demons and, like, your shadow side or something, and I'm like, I'm good. I'll just do my shadow work, and I'm good. I don't need an herbal tea to remove a demon. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm good to go.
I hope they had a long talk, like, are you sure you want to do this? Because once you start this, it's not like you can just be like, nope, I'm good.
It's true. Yeah, and you're supposed to, I've researched it, you're supposed to throw up the tea before your body digests it. So they give you a bucket to vomit it. I'm like, who would go through that process, man? Just to have, like, a spiritual experience? Like, I'd hate throwing up. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, it'll be, with Kat and I talking, it's going to be a good one. You know? So, anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This will be uploaded as a podcast, you know, on all major streaming sites, including Apple, Spotify, all that jazz. It's good to be back, Eilfie. Doesn't it feel good to be normal again? Right?
I love it. This is awesome. And we go on tangents and like talk about all the weird stuff.
Oh yeah, we're like the queen of the weird talks. Also, please make sure you're following us on TikTok because it's blowing up. Yeah. And also, I would love to shout. Yeah, numbers are going up. Also, any fans that are watching, can you please engage with our TikTok content as much as possible? So liking it, commenting on it, responding to others, because the more engagement we have, the more it helps our numbers go up, and we're just trying to push it so hard. We want to get all those followers. You know, the main goal is to get a big social media following because we still want to get the series signed. That's still the goal, is to get Ghost Girl Diaries, the series, and it's going to be freaking amazing. Right, Eilfie?
I can't wait. This is gonna be so awesome.
Oh my god, yeah, it's going great. Thank you guys for everything, as always. Make sure you subscribe to all of our social media. Make sure you download all of our information, from ghostgirldiaries.com. Obviously, TikTok's #1. And as always, thank you guys so much, and we will catch you guys next time.